This is The American Revolution by Lily Smith, Lindsay Becker, and Emma Straus.
The Navigation Act of 1651. The Navigation Act of 1651 was a series of acts passed in the English Parliament in 1651, 1660, and 1663. They were designed to regulate colonial trade and enabled England to collect taxes in the colonies. The series of navigation acts were seen as detriment to the American colonies and led to the dissension and rebellion in the colonies. The navigation acts were repealed in 1849. Salutary neglect. It was a long-standing British policy in the 13 colonies which allowed the colonists to violate the laws associated with trade. It benefited the colonists, boosting their profits from trade. The British reversed their policy of salutary neglect to raise taxes in the colonies to pay for the huge war debt that stemmed from the French and Indian Wars. The reversal of the policy of salutary neglect led to the insurrection in the colonies, the Boston Tea Party, the American Revolution, and the Declaration of Independence. Proclamation of 1763. On October 7, 1763, King George III sent out a proclamation that forbade colonial settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains. Any colonists who were already settled in this area were forced to return to the eastern side of the Appalachians. The territory given to the Indians wasn't to be part of any colony, and the colonists couldn't buy or trade for land in that area. This made a boundary limiting the colonists to the east side of the Appalachians. King George III didn't realize the amount of territory he was giving the Indians. Sugar Acts. The Sugar Act was a law that attempted to curb the smuggling of sugar and molasses in the colonies by reducing the previous tax rate and enforcing the collection of duties. The colonists felt the Sugar Act constituted a restriction of justice. They still continued to smuggle molasses until 1766, when the duty on foreign molasses was lowered to 1 penny. Many colonists objected to the Act's revenue-raising taxation and regulation. Opposition was minor due to the lack of organization and the hesitancy of legislatures to take a stand against Parliament.
The Sons of Liberty. Who were they? They were a colonial protest group created by Samuel Adams, and they operated in secret. The effect sparked the rebel spirit in the colonies, and their motto was, "No taxation without representation." The Stamp Act of 1765. What did it do? The act was a British tax on the colonists that taxed printed items such as paper, newspapers, and of course, stamps. The Quartering Act. 2 acts of British Parliament that stated the American colonists must provide the British with whatever they needed, such as food, clothing, and even housing. The Boston Massacre, March 5, 1770. There was a patriot mob that threw snowballs, stones, and sticks at British soldiers. This resulted in 5 dead patriots and 6 injured. This fueled the tensions that led up to the war.
The Gaspee Affair occurred June 9, 1772, at Gaspee Point in Warwick, Rhode Island. This was very significant, and it led up to the American Revolution. The Gaspee was a British customs schooner that had been enforcing the Navigation Acts in and around Rhode Island in 1772. On this date, Rhode Islanders set fire to the Gaspee. The Tea Act took place in 1773. Its purpose was to bail out the East India Company. The British granted a monopoly to the company on the importation and sale of tea to the colonies. The Boston Tea Party would soon follow. The Boston Tea Party was caused by the Tea Act, was a political protest done by the Sons of Liberty on December 16th in 1773. The colonists dumped tea into the harbor, dressed as the Indians, in protest of the tax on tea. The Intolerable Acts. The Intolerable Acts occurred in 1774. They consisted of 4 acts and are also known as the Cohen-Seat Acts. They consisted of the Boston Port Act, which closed the harbor, discounted landing or shipping of goods. It consisted of the Massachusetts Government Acts, which was an act for better regulating the government of Massachusetts, and the Administration Act of Justice Act, which administrated justice in the case of questioned people about any acts done by them for suppression of riots, and the Quebec Act, which is an act for making effectual provision for the government of Province of Quebec in North America. It was under these tense circumstances that the First Continental Congress was called. The First Continental Congress was caused by the Intolerable Acts and was a meeting of delegates from the colonies to discuss the Intolerable Acts and rule of the British over them. The meeting was from September 5th to October 26th in 1774.